Hey, welcome to Giraffe Academy. My name is Mike. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you guys about classes and objects in PHP. Now, a lot of times in PHP, we're going to be dealing with different types of data. And in PHP, we have a certain set of data types that we can work with. So we can represent things like strings, which are just plain text. We can represent whole numbers like integers and decimal numbers. We can also represent true false values like booleans. But here's the problem is a lot of times when we're writing our PHP programs, we're not going to be able to represent everything just using like a single string or a single boolean or a single number. Like there's a lot of like real world entities like in the real world that can't just be broken down into a single string or a single number. Like for example, like we could represent something simple like someone's age, for example. Like I could create an age variable over here and I could set it equal to like 90, right? Maybe someone's 90 years old. For something simple like that, like someone's age, we can easily represent it with, something like a number. But there's a lot of things in the real world that can't be represented with just a number or a string or a boolean. And essentially the problem is that we only have these, 3 or 4 different data types. And so the types of information that we can represent and model in our programs is very limited. So PHP recognizes this problem, right? The problem that we can't represent everything in the real world just with a single string or number. So in PHP, we can actually create our own custom data types. And we can do that by creating things called classes. A class is essentially just a specification for a custom data type. So just like we have the string data type and like an integer data type, a Boolean data type, I could create my own custom data type that would allow me to model something in the real world, right? So a string, for example, represents like plain text. A number represents a number. But I could create a custom data type to represent something like a phone, or I could represent like a keyboard, or I could represent a water bottle. Like I could represent anything I could think of in the real world using a class because I'm able to create my own custom data type. So in this tutorial, we are going to create our own class, which like I said is a custom data type. And then we're gonna use that inside of our program. So let's say for the purposes of this tutorial that we're writing a piece of software for a library, right? So let's say that we want to, write some software that will help a library manage all of its books. So what we're actually gonna do is we're gonna create a book class. And this book class will basically allow us to represent and model books inside of our PHP program. So I'm going to show you guys how we can create a class. I'm just going to come down here in my PHP tags and I'm just going to type class and then a space, and now we want to type the name of the class that we want to create. In my case, I'm going to create a book class because I want to be able to model a book inside of my program. And so I'm just going to type book like that. And a lot of times when we're creating classes, people will use a capital letter. It's not necessary, but that's just kind of like a pretty common convention. Then I'm going to type an open and close curly bracket, and I'm just going to enter a few times. So inside of this open and close curly bracket, we can start writing our custom data type. We can start creating our class. Now, whenever we create classes in PHP, what we're actually going to do is we're going to take this book and we're going to break it up into a series of attributes. So remember, by default in PHP, we have like strings, we have numbers, and we have booleans. So we can represent all of that information by default. But when we create a new data type, generally what we're going to do is create the new data type based off of those other data types. So for example, with this book class, what I want to do is define a series of attributes that represent a book. And so what I can do is I can actually start thinking of what different attributes are going to make up a book. Let's try to think of some. I think a good set of attributes would be a title, an author, and a number of pages. So every book has a title, every book has an author, and every book has a number of pages. So inside of this book class, I can basically say that every book should have a title, an author, and a number of pages. And I can do that by defining attributes. So the way I can create attributes is I can just come in here and I can say var, and then I can make a $sign and I'm going to type out the name of the attribute. So like I said, a book is going to have a title, and I'm going to type a semicolon. A book is also going to have an author, and a book is also going to have a number of pages. So I'm just going to type pages. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm telling PHP that I want to create a new book data type. And this book data type is going to be composed of a title, an author, and pages. So every book inside of our program will have a title, an author, and pages. And so essentially this class is a specification. So it's like a blueprint for creating a book inside of my program. What I can do now is I can come down here below this class declaration and I can actually create a book inside of my program. So I could model a real book in my PHP program. And we can create a book in our program much like we would create a variable in our program. So I can make this $, and I could just call this like book 1, for example. And I'm gonna set this equal to new book, just like that. And essentially what this is doing is it's creating a new book data type and it's storing it inside of this book variable. So up here, we created this book class. And this is basically just a blueprint. It's a template for what a book is inside of our program. And down here, I created an actual book. And this is what we call an object. So an object is an instance of a class. Like I said, a class is a blueprint for our book, right? The book class is basically just defining what a book is. And down here, I'm creating an actual book. And so because this is an actual book, I can give it its own title, its own author, and its own number of pages. I could come down here and I could say book 1, and I can make a dash and a greater than sign, and I can say title, and I'm just gonna set this equal to something. So I could say the title of this book is gonna be Harry Potter. So let's say that this is a Harry Potter book. And I could do this for each of the attributes. So I could also say book 1 author, and the author of the Harry Potter books is J.K. Rowling. And then finally we can say book 1 and pages, and we can give this a number of pages. So let's say it has 400 pages. So essentially what I did is I created a book in my program and I gave that book a title, I gave that book an author, and I gave that book a number of pages. So what I could do is I could actually come down here and I could print some of this information out. So I could echo out like book 1 title. And now this is gonna print out the title of book 1. So we should get Harry Potter. And you'll see over here we're printing out Harry Potter. I could do the same thing for the other attributes, so like the author. Now we're gonna be printing out the author of book 1, which is J.K. Rowling. So before in my program, before I created that book class, I had no way of representing a book, right? I had no way of like storing or representing or modeling a book inside of my program. But now, since I created this book class, I basically created a template for what a book is. I created a book data type. And now I can use that book data type to create variables. So now this book 1 variable is actually storing a book object. And remember, an object is just an instance of a book. So we created this Harry Potter book, and actually, why don't we come down here and we'll create another book. So I'm actually just gonna copy this whole thing and we'll paste this down here. So in addition to creating a Harry Potter book, let's say we wanted to create a Lord of the Rings book. I'm actually gonna change this to book 2. So instead of being called book 1, I'm changing this to book 2. And I can do the same thing. I can say new book. And now over here, we're gonna change this. So this is gonna be a Lord of the Rings book, and the author is Tolkien. And let's say the Lord of the Rings has like 700 pages. So essentially what I'm doing now is I'm creating a new book, and this time it's a Lord of the Rings book. The author is Tolkien, and it has 700 pages. So here I have book 1. This is a Harry Potter book. The author is J.K. Rowling. Down here I have book 2, and this is a Lord of the Rings book. So I could do the same thing for book 2. I could print out like book 2, and the author of book 2 is gonna be Tolkien. So now we're printing out Tolkien. So just like I can create 2 strings, like I could come down here in my program and I could create like string 1, and this would be like whatever, and I could create another string like string 2, and this is gonna be whatever. Just like I can create 2 strings in my program, I can also create 2 books. So we basically created a new data type. And it's important to know the difference. So up here we have a class. A class is basically just a blueprint. It's a specification for what a book is in our program. We're basically defining the new data type. Down here, we're creating what are called objects. An object is an instance of a class. So an object is an actual book. So we have a book object, and it has the title Harry Potter, the author J.K. Rowling, and 400 pages. Down here we have another book object with the title Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, and 700. So these are both books, but they have different titles, they have different authors, and they have different pages. And that is the beauty of classes and objects, is we can take something complex like a book and we can represent it inside of our programs. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to Draft Academy to be the first to know when we release new content. Also, we're always looking to improve, so if you have any constructive criticism or questions or anything, leave a comment below. Finally, if you're enjoying Draft Academy and you want to help us grow, head over to draftacademy.com/contribute and invest in our future.